Girls of Reddit who have rejected people. What's the worst way someone has taken it? We went on one date and I declined a second. A couple of days after that he called me and told me what I had been wearing that day. This went on for a couple of months. I'd literally never see him, but at least 3 times a week he'd know exactly what I wore. Called me an ugly whore and said no one would ever want to duck me. He didn't like when I asked how I could both be unduckable and a whore. This is a slightly different take, but I turned a guy down for a date and he then posted a long snap story about how much he loves his wife that he had neglected to mention all that time. My sister got followed home by a dude she rejected. He went up to the house and started talking to her kids and telling them he was their new dad. Luckily, real dad came out in his police attire. Put a real quick end to that. Edit. Want to clear up some confusion. My sister and the real dad are married, not divorced or anything. The guy followed her home from the hospital she works at, where he was a patient under her care. He made a move on her. She said no. There was no relationship between them besides nurse-patient. Well, maybe not in his eyes. I refer to my brother-in-law as my brother, mostly cause I'm too lazy to type it out, but also cause he's been in my life since I was a little kid. Brother was not threatening the man as a cop but instead as a father. He just happened to be getting ready to leave for work at the same time. The guy ended up getting transferred to another hospital to be closer to his family after complications from overdosing. After we got divorced he murdered the next woman to reject him. Eater. Link. The information contained in the story is very brutal, please read at your own discretion. Edit. Okay, answering some questions here. No, I was not the ex he shot at nor the victim of the 6 offenses. I didn't know of the full extent of his criminal history when we married. I met him after he had been out of prison for a year following the assault charges. He did 12 years for that. I was stupid and thought he had learned his lesson. Obviously I was wrong. We were together less than a year. We got married on a stupid whim. Don't ask why. We had been divorced for 6 months when she was murdered. He had a list of names of people to kill next. I was on top of that list. I guess he figured he had killed one person. Why not everyone who he felt had wronged him? I blame myself to an extent. I feel like if I hadn't gone through the divorce when I did, she would still be alive. However, I do know it's not my fault. I believe the dog survived, however I am unsure whether it got adopted or not. About the length of his sentence. In Washington state we have a violent offender 3-strike law where if you have 3 violent offenses or something you're supposed to go to prison for life. However, for some reason, because of a technicality, they were unable to get him on the 3 strikes law. I am not sure why he only got 37.5 years and not more. He was convicted of 1st-degree murder, and so theoretically I would think there would be a longer sentence, but I guess not. I tried to respond to everybody but I just couldn't, so I tried to answer the questions here. If there's any more, please let me know. I'm doing well now, yes. I'm remarried and I have 3 awesome kids. I had actually heard of a lot of people doing this before, but I'd never had it happen to me. And when it did, it was completely devastating. He told me I had to go out with him or he would kill himself. He then said goodbye very convincingly and emotionally and turned his phone off, stopped picking up or answering any texts. I knew him from when we went to high school together, and so I actually had his best mates and his dad's phone numbers. I phoned them and sent the screenshots of the messages to them. Absolutely hysterical and worrying that he was in a gutter somewhere. However, it was very quickly discovered by his livid father that he was actually round a mate smoking weed, and he thought that this would at least get him a pity shag. What a complete and utter twat. Edit. Hello. To answer the nationality questions, most of you were half right. I'm half Australian, half English. I have kind of a weird accent from growing up in both countries. When I was a nanny, I was walking around with the baby in the pram and we visited a bookshop. A man in there started talking to me and then asked me out. Very kindly. Keeping my father's advice in mind about being kind when I have to reject men when they ask me out, I said that was a nice offer, but my boyfriend might not be too keen on it. His response to that was to lean in and try and kiss me. I told him to get the duck off me. He then exploded with rage and started screaming in my face. I was saved by the bookstore employee. The man stormed out of the shop. I spent the next few hours shaking like a leaf. What a champion. I turned down a guy that was known for being the popular gooier and I thought he was a bit of a d-head. When he tried to kiss me I turned my head the other way, said I wasn't interested and walked off. He grabbed my hand, spat in my face and said I missed the best opportunity in my life and the only reason he tried to kiss me was because he pitied me. In high school I turned a guy down so he went around spreading rumors that he tried to duck me but my V was deformed and practically closed up. He spent the rest of the year talking it about how nasty I was, unclean, unshaven etc. Sometime about 5 years ago, he tried to add me on Facebook and I blocked him. Duck that guy. I spent months trying to convince people I knew how to wash my asshole. By getting nudes from another girl, cropping her face out, and showing them to everybody saying it was me. He broke into my house and chased me into my bedroom, then spent 10 minutes shouting through my locked bedroom door that I should come out and have a reasonable conversation with him, adult to adult. He was 15 at the time, and although the rejection happened over the phone, he was so irate that he illegally drove a car to the nearest place he knew to where my house was. I'd once told him I'll live near the hospital, and waited there demanding I give him more accurate directions to my house. In retrospect, I probably should have been more terrified than I was. He stopped his car in the middle of an intersection and just kept slamming his fists on the steering wheel. He told me he had considered trying to get me pregnant so I would have to marry him. Guy asked me out during an Uber pool ride. I told him I wasn't interested and he started moving closer and asking me why I wasn't interested and what was wrong with him. It was uncomfortable to say the least. My Uber driver, for some reason, thought it was hilarious to see me pressed against the door to try and get away from this random guy invading my personal space. Thankfully no one has threatened my life. He killed a stray cat that he found was taking shelter in his basement. He later told me it was my fault and that I had caused him to do it. I wish he would have just threatened me directly or started some bullet rumors, not kill an innocent animal over it. Chased my car down the major city street as I drove away, running after me until he collapsed in the road. Called me dozens of times, eventually blaming everyone from my little brother to my dentist for breaking us up. Then flew to his hometown the next day and committed suicide. His extreme clinginess and jealousy was the reason for my decision to take a break, and though clearly I made the right decision, I felt terribly guilty for years. Edit. Details. Edit 2. It's been 20 plus years. I'm fine and happily married now. Thank you for all the supportive and thoughtful responses. I also once had a guy send me hundreds of text messages calling me all kinds of names, cursing me out and threatening me because I didn't have sex with him after our entirely lackluster first and last date. I didn't even bother reading beyond the first 50, just let him go on and on until I blocked and mass deleted. Still, it was nuts. He called me roofie bait and then followed me around campus for a couple months. Went into a gas station to get my mom some lottery tickets and the cashier asks for my ID. While holding my ID, he begins questioning my marital status among other personal details. I told him I wasn't interested and paid. He gives me my ID back. I go to the car, start it up and begin to tell my little sister what happened as she was waiting in the car and she starts yelling that someone is coming over. Now the cashier is tapping my window and yelling, "Are we friends?" I put the car in reverse and drove away. While I don't know for certain who did it, the next day I had my tire slashed. I was told that the way my tire looked seemed like it was most likely intentional. Unfortunately this was like 8 years ago so I no longer have the picture of the tire. As a precaution, I had some of my male friends go by and tell him to leave me alone. I never went back to that gas station and didn't have any issues with the guy after that. The worst part was I was 18 and when I told my mom what happened regarding the guy harassing me, she didn't believe me. Duck you Bill. You're single because you're a creep. The old "you're actually a dumb whore" who I didn't like anyway after he wrote a letter expressing his feelings about me. I politely told him that he showed a lot of courage but that I just wanted to be friends. Worst part, he was my work study partner. I was 19 years old. Looking back I should have contacted my boss who would have done something about the work partnership. I was spending time with an ex because he insisted he needed the company and we were still on friendly terms. I ended up having to kick him out of my house. He was acting crazy, keeping me up in non-sexual ways. Talking ended when I told him I needed to sleep and would kick him out if he continued disrupting my rest. He spent the following 3 days sleeping outside of my house and only left to get suitcases a visit, which he subsequently left by my back door. He would repeat this routine every few months until I moved, insisting that he would hold my bike hostage until I stopped being a bitch and let him into my house. Needless to say, he never set foot in my home again. A guy on Cupid had messaged me a few times, and I told him I wasn't interested. After the third time I asked him not to message me again and he threatened to track me down and anally abuse me. He was also old enough to be my father, so there's that. He spread rumors about me at work that I ducked all the guys there and people believed it. Don't know if this even counts because I was in 5th grade, but some acquaintance of mine confessed, and when I rejected him he slapped me across the face. Then he started harassing me and my younger brother, until my best friend, still friends to this day, beat the shit out of him. This thread helps explain why some women have trouble saying no. Stalking, slander, threats of rape. The ones that will have the worst story possible are not able to comment here, not because they are not on Reddit, but because they are not alive anymore. Unfortunately, there are too many. Backpacking with my girlfriend. We are both women, and staying in a hostel, 6-bed mixed dorm. All is well until it is just me, my girlfriend and an old Indian guy in the room who is ridiculously drunk. We ordered pizza that night and he started shouting at us for not ordering him pizza in the common room. Eventually he started telling people he wanted to marry my girlfriend. Asked me if he could marry her, to which I said no. Go to bed. You're drunk etc. Anything to get him away from us. We went to bed eventually. He kept talking and talking about how much he liked my girlfriend. I asked him to stop. He was making her uncomfortable and repeatedly said go to sleep, which he didn't. He proceeded to start masturbating over me and saying my girlfriend's name, as I was bottom bunk. My girlfriend was top bunk. It was horrible. My girlfriend threw a bottle of water off his head and we both ran out of the room to go to the reception desk to complain. He followed us. We had to complain about him masturbating while he was stood there. He flipped the duck out, threatened to murder us both, said he would kill the guy on reception, kept saying why would I masturbate over you? You're disgusting. The hostel kicked him out, gave us a private room, but he stayed and argued for hours. Even the police had to come. My current girlfriend has a 6 inches cut on her left thigh after her ex assaulted her with a knife in an attempt to abuse her. As they fought, she yanked out the knife and held it at his throat to force him off her. The ducker is serving 7 years in prison. I went on a terrible date with a coworker. He got wasted and really embarrassed himself and me in front of a lot of people. I share a lot of my life on the internet and I draw the line at going into detail of what happened that night. That is how bad it was. The next day, I gave a different male co-worker a ride home, which was something that happened every Wednesday. The guy I went out with followed us, confronted our co-worker and his wife about the affair I was having with him. I wasn't. Pride. And pulled an actual white picket fence out of the neighbor's yard and threw it at the dude. The police were called. It was a whole thing. The best part of the story is that the good co-worker was given a promotion so that he was the direct supervisor of both myself and the jerk. I didn't have to work with the jerk too much longer after that. So I really liked this guy in high school. He was kind of edgy and I was a pretty good kid. He asked if I wanted to skip school with him and naturally I was all for it. I walked to his house after getting dropped off at school and we watched movies. He eventually turns on porn while we are kissing, making out, and tries to put his hand down my pants. I was really nervous because I was a virgin and hadn't even touched a D or anything. I found my way out of there pretty quickly. I kind of just stopped talking to him, really because I wasn't ready to have sex, and he decides to tell everyone he took my virginity and I was bad in bed. I was mortified. He's now a meth addict, so now Osaru's copyright airing. I have access to the student files, I know where you live. A few weeks later there were reports of a guy looking into windows around my neighborhood. Thank God he got caught before he escalated to a band or worse. Recently I passed a homeless man that catcalled me without acknowledging him. So he followed me for 2 blocks while calling me a bitch every 45 seconds. Maybe not rejection OP meant in the strictest sense, but when I broke up with my boyfriend of 2 years, he burst into snotty gut-wrenching tears and started dry heaving. And then that night after I moved all my stuff out of the apartment he kept calling me and hanging up as soon as I answered. Finally didn't hang up when I answered at 3 AM. He threatened to kill himself. For weeks he left me things in my mailbox. Little presents like candy, CDs, a game. I'm a girl in the National Guard. Now, the army's got this thing called SHARP, TLDR, the army's attempt to do SIR for sexual harassment assault. Half the time, it ducks up and lets it happen. The other half of the time it throws the book at someone so hard they end up under the Library of Congress. Keep in mind, this dude's doing this with that hanging over his head. This Navy Reserve dude I worked with tried to ask me out. I told him nah, forget about cause that wasn't my jam. He was weird. So no. I worked with him. Bigger no. I play on his team. Big at least no. So, he didn't take it well. Started stalking me. As in, he managed to find out the name of my dog, what apartment block I live in, and the name of my girlfriend. Figured out who my tattoo artist was. Managed to find out the exact make and model of my bike. And I never took it to drill. Ever. For duck's sake. The dude found out the name and specialization of my major professor. So I'm weirded out as duck at this point. Because he showed up to our section one day. Told me he knew all this. And that I was gonna go out with him or he was gonna tell my platoon sergeant that I was being sexist towards him. So, remember SHARP. Every unit's supposed to have a SHARP EO rep. Point of contact for sexual harassment. Equal opportunity it for that unit. Our unit's rep, my platoon sergeant. I just let him go. Because duck, let's have platoon daddy hear about how Snuffy here is stalking the id out of me. Just makes SHARP EO it easier. After some fun paperwork, this dude managed to talk his ass right out of the Navy. When they beg, it's just a really uncomfortable situation. I was celebrating my friend's birthday and he insisted on walking me back home before popping the question. I politely told him I wasn't interested. He proceeded to plead and beg, saying that it was his birthday and that's his birthday wish, lol, and how I shouldn't ruin his birthday. I politely declined. Over and over again. This continued back and forth until I saw one of my friends walking by, and I instantly called him over. Without thinking I introduced the two of them and promptly went, I gotta go now, bye, and went inside and locked the door. A friend of mine in college broke up with her boyfriend. He for some reason rented a full body bunny suit as part of a surprise to win her back. She left him crying alone in a bunny costume on his bed. Kind of sad and funny. I didn't overtly reject this guy. He just realized I didn't like him back. We were 10 when this started, so he physically assaulted me and harassed me until my parents told the school they were going to sue his parents and subpoena my entire grade, forcing the principal to deal with 60 sets of angry, entitled parents, unless the administration separated us. Although that was pretty tame next to what my mom's high school boyfriend did when she broke up with him. That guy showed up at her apartment with a gun. Threatened to abuse me if I wasn't going to have sex with him willingly. I was pregnant, out celebrating my birthday with my partner. We had been for dinner and decided to call in at a bar where all of my friends were, as they wanted to wish me a happy birthday. Just before we left I headed to the bathroom, and my partner and friends went outside for a cigarette. On my way back from the bathroom a guy stopped me. He said something about my boobs then attempted to motorboat me. I grabbed his chin and pushed his face away from me and went to walk away. He smashed a pint glass into the side of my face and punched me in the head several times. I was lucky that there was a table behind me that I was able to grab onto or else I'd have fallen to the floor. He was thrown out by the bouncers, but it was up to myself and my friends to call the police to report what had happened. He was arrested. It went to court. He was found not guilty of sexual assault and he pleaded guilty to assault. He didn't get any jail time and I got you a cute 180 compensation, which I received in 1p monthly payments. Joined the army to get his hands on a firearm, which he then used to threaten my life. Jokes on him though, as joining the army is a bit more than just a free gun. Edit. He joined the military and is currently serving. Not denying the fact that he's a complete idiot. I blocked his number and he ended up in a different state, so haven't heard from him except seeing Facebook posts from his family. It looks like he's doing well and I genuinely hope it was a positive life change for him. I've got 2. 1. A friend who had feelings for me who I rejected 5 years ago wouldn't stop trying to bring it up nicely to convince me. I stopped talking to him but periodically he adds me on Facebook, which I reject. 2 weeks ago, he found my Instagram and added me. We haven't talked since I made it very clear that it was a no. He's never been threatening but it's just so frustrating that he keeps trying. 2. My ex tried to booty call me post relationship and I turned him down. He kept texting me after I stopped answering for the next hour. He'd started the attempt by implying I was a slut, and he got engaged to the girl he was dating when he did this a month later. Didn't happen to me, but to a friend of mine. Guy on her floor asked her out by buying her cake and writing a letter. She said no, so he crumpled the letter and ate it. He let her keep the cake though, which was nice. Never anything incredibly insane, but last week, this guy sent me messages on all social media and texts before I blocked him, calling me names and generally being hateful. Yeah, really felt like I missed out turning down that drama. I finally managed to dump my emotionally abusive ex for the last time, and a couple weeks later he found out I was staying at my mom's. One night he hid in the bushes in her garden and waited for her to go to bed so he could knock on my window and give me a bag full of presents. 6 months later his mom rang me and asked when I was going to put him out of his misery and get back together with him because he was becoming unbearably depressed. It's literally been 6 months of absolutely no contact. Why the duck are you all still waiting? Why women often can't just tell him no. We're not trying to lead men on by being nice. We're trying to protect ourselves. Like when they threaten to abuse or kill you. Or when they follow after you even though you've said no. He tried to follow me home. It was one date. Ducking terrifying. This was years ago but I still get chills thinking about it.